I thought my marriage was perfect until my wife suddenly stopped being intimate with me. At first, I tried to understand and support her, but as weeks turned into months, my suspicion grew. I never expected to be the type of person to snoop through my partner's belongings, but desperate times call for desperate measures. And what I found confirmed my worst fears. My wife was cheating on me. For a few weeks after my trip to the village, I watched Olya. To be honest, I did not notice any changes in her, except that she began to drink the tea she had brought with some sophistication. After a couple of days, we returned to the usual routine. The intimacy of his wife was the same, unstable. Then she wanted. Then she did not like it. I did not understand what to do. Without expecting it, I'd even bought a couple of outfits to play with. She threw them all away, with the words, "What do you take me for?" Already by the fall, she began to grumble a lot. I was even a little glad, because she had a lack of intimacy, so she was faithful to me. Looking at the angry Olya, I didn't understand what she wanted from me. Almost every night I paid attention to her. The last time, she even made a scandal. I stopped trying to please her and just continued to sleep with her sister. By winter, I realized that all we had from family was a stamp in our papers. We had very little contact. Olya was at home with the baby all the time. Even walks in the evening or going out somewhere disappeared. When there were guests at home, she would show everyone that she was happy, but as soon as he left, she changed completely. My attempts to talk to her were fruitless. She would say that we were fine and that she didn't want intimacy. I was very upset, didn't know what to do. I could not leave my wife and child, but I could not live as an invisible person either. There was no good advice from my relatives. I think that's when I got published. I'll just keep on living the way I was living, pretending that we were doing well, even though it was completely the opposite. I came home solely for my son. I played with him a lot and tried to raise him as well as I could. As they say, trouble doesn't come alone. And my relationship with my wife's sister also deteriorated. Over time, she began to demand more time and attention. And once during a quarrel, she demanded that I leave my family and marry her. That was the end of my affairs. I just couldn't be with a woman like that. And as a consequence, I was left with virtually no intimacy. I was interrupted by young candidates who came to us for an interview. Some of them showed with just one look that they were going to get a job with all the unprofessional skills. You know, I think the time of year can have a big impact on a person's emotional state. With the onset of spring, I felt hope for a rebirth of my relationship with my wife. Started to give gifts and attention, often went out a lot of other things. At first it felt like it was working, and I was filled with hope. It was as if my wife had changed. She started to walk around the house in more attractive clothes. I even wondered if she had a boyfriend, but after a few attempts at solicitation and rejection, I realized that she did not. After all, after every one of her cheats that I knew of, she constantly wanted intimacy until it gradually faded away. One evening, I sat there wondering what I should do. It was as if I needed a breakthrough and unusual move, but I had no way of knowing what. A call from a good old friend brought me out of my musings. He and I were from the same village, and we had stayed together all our childhood, until I left for the city. "Tai, Kostya, how are you?" I was sincerely glad to get the call. "How are you, buddy?" "I'm good." In his voice I also felt joy. We talked for 5 minutes about how we were doing, what we were doing, until we got to the real reason for the call. "Listen, help me out, huh? My brother's going into the army, and he loves hockey, but he's never seen it live, and tomorrow night is the Tampa Bay Lightning game. Remember when we used to watch regular games as kids? Honestly, I've never been to the stadium myself. Can I stay with you for one night, and we'll leave in the morning? If you agree, we'll leave right now, by the night train, and we'll be at your place by tomorrow morning." I felt that I could not refuse him. After all, he was my closest friend, and it had been a long time since we had seen each other. "Of course, Kostya, what a question. Come, there is a place for you. You know the address, right? I'll send it to you just in case. I was already anticipating our reunion. Having warned my wife, I tried to fall asleep quickly. Olya did not show much emotion. She just said that she would take the child to her parents and called them. I woke up without even having breakfast and rushed to the train station. And when I was almost there, I thought about Olya. And what if one of the guests slept with her? She had never cheated on me at home. In my head, there was a picture of my Olya cheating not with guests. I quickly dismissed such thoughts from my mind. I was sure of my friend, and the fact that the second guest was his own brother also added to the confidence in the faithfulness of my wife. Suddenly, the thought occurred to me that I should call Olya and tell her to dress more modestly. But I decided that she herself would understand. We embraced for a long time with Kostya on the pen. Not finished, I was waiting for a little shock. His brother Grisha was a head taller than me and broader. I remembered him as one of those little punk kids, and here he was straight up mature. As it turned out on the way, Grisha had tried to go to town and enroll in school. But it did not work out. But he went to town anyway to work. After a couple of months, however, he returned home. His father was upset that his youngest son was doing nothing and told him to go to the army. Grisha didn't think long and decided that he would join the army with the summer draft. Finally, we came home. The guys took a long look at the apartment buildings, as after all, they are not frequent guests in the city. When we rang the doorbell, we had to wait a bit. Olya wouldn't open the door in any way, and I left my keys. The wait was worth it, at least for the guests. Olya greeted us in a short dress. When the guests came in, Olya hugged everyone, but she hugged Grisha somehow longer. Please come to the table. Almost everything is ready. My wife smiled and walked towards our bedroom. When we sat down at the table, the expression on the boys' faces was a little dazed. They didn't seem to be expecting this. Neither was I, especially Grisha. He clearly was not ready for this. What a great wife you have, my friend. Kostya said it with admiration, and Grisha only rejoiced. In 5 minutes, his wife came out of the bedroom with the child in her hand and went to the kitchen. Dad has come to pick up Roma, and then I'm all yours, boy. It sounded flirty and weird. It seemed to me that she was looking at Grisha the whole time. Grisha, bring some moonshine. Let's have a drink. Kostya said after his wife had left. Grisha went into the other room, where they left their bag. Not in the bag. You sure you took it with you? Grisha's face was puzzled. Kostya went to look for the bottle in the bag himself, but did not find it. Sorry, bro, I must have forgotten to take it. Grisha, go get some cognac quickly. Kostya, as if trying to atone for his guilt. Grisha got up and left the apartment. The store was 1 minute walk home, right next to the entrance, but Grisha was gone about 30 minutes. At first I thought maybe I hadn't found him or was lost, but I remembered my wife wasn't home either. I was pretty sure they were spending time together. My wife came home right away and headed toward the bedroom, and Grisha was red as a tomato. They must have been kissing, I thought at the time. My wife came into the kitchen, already in a painfully modest outfit. I noticed Grisha staring at her openly and several times asked for more. He was understandable. You do not see girls like that where he came from, and also so close. And yet, I did not expect that my wife would give it to one of the guests. Olya cooked her specialty, chicken with potatoes, which was also my favorite. The guests were constantly praising both her food and her appearance, which made her blush and give her a beautiful smile. The brother drank, and I could not afford it, for I was about to drive the studio car. I had 2 drinks. The first was to the meeting, and the second to me and Olya. But my wife did not hold back and drank, though not as guests. After we finished eating, we moved into the living room. Olya stayed behind to clear the table and wash the dishes. I was glad to meet an old acquaintance and remember the old days. Grisha went out several times. I wasn't terribly interested in what he and Olya were doing there. We got to the stadium without much trouble, though I was a little drunk. Olya sat to my left and Kostya and Grisha sat to my right. I was not some hockey fan and watched the game without much enthusiasm. The first period was uneventful overall. The teams seemed to be watching each other, while we, as spectators, didn't talk much. Only occasionally, my guests commented on something. During the break, Kostya and Grisha went to the bathroom. I didn't feel like it, so I stayed. Olya also went with them. They came back before the second period started. Olga and Grisha were walking arm in arm, laughing about something. I expected that Olya would sit down next to me, but she, as if she hadn't noticed me, sat down on the other side next to Grisha. I felt a little uncomfortable, but I did not say anything. The second period went more vigorously. People in the bleachers yelled something, jumped up when dangerous moments in goals, pucks. Without expecting it, I got caught up in the game. I was overwhelmed with emotion, as if I had been a Tampa Bay Lightning fan for decades. About halfway through the second period, the game quieted down a bit, and I sat back, as if out of the corner of my eye I could see movement. I waited until the puck was that way and quietly turned my head. For a second I thought, I wish I hadn't looked. Olya and Grisha were sitting there, cuddling, even though I was sitting next to them. Maybe I would have watched them even longer, but a fight broke out on the ice, and my attention was fixed on the two hockey players, who were trying to hit each other harder. Later I wondered if I already cared so much about my wife's loyalty that I was so easily distracted by it, but I never found an answer. As soon as the whistle blew, I hurried to the restroom. There were a lot of people everywhere. No longer having the energy to wait, I hurried to the far side of the stadium and found an empty restroom. It was either for staff or something else. I was almost done doing my thing and was about to get up into the toilet as the door opened and people came in. The voices I immediately recognized. They were my guests, and I decided to listen for a while. Damn, brother, his wife sure is just a fire. It was Grisha. Yes, there is that. What are you? You laid eyes on her. I noticed where your hand was. Kostya's voice was stern and displeased. She was more like me. She sat down by herself, started flirting, put her hand on her knees. Grisha did not immediately respond. It seemed, under the threatening gaze of his older brother, he thought about what to say. Don't you have the strength and will? Take it away, that's all. She is the wife of my friend. Syriova took us in, and you do this. Kostya was still serious, and I began to feel proud of my friend. After that, they were silent, and already when the front door opened, Grisha closed it again and began to speak. Brother, there will be a request to you. Do you understand where I have to go? When else will I try a woman and hear such a woman? Tell me you have somewhere to go. You wanted to buy parts for our car. Here you go, please. Grisha asked his brother to help me fuck my wife. Kostya was silent for a long time, and I was dying for his answer. Go to hell, you idiot, Kostya said loudly and walked out. I waited a couple of minutes and headed to our seats. Inside, I was both happy and upset by Kostya's decision. After all, our life was almost dead, and my wife's cheating could have brought it back to life. I watched the third period standing up. Mock had reached its peak of entertainment. The game was dynamic, spectacular. Occasionally, looking over at Olya and Grisha, they continued their games. Tampa Bay Lightning still pressed on toward the end and pulled out the win, catching the opponent in mistakes. As we began to make our way toward the exit, Olya ran up to me, took my hand, and pressed hard against me. I didn't understand why, but I could see from her face that she was having fun. We got in the car and drove home. Along with the fact that we were getting closer, I was regretting more and more the fact that Kostya turned out to be a good friend. I was already imagining him distracting me while his brother entertained my wife, and then they switched places. Finally, we drove up to the driveway. Grisha and Olya got out right away, I turned off the car and was just about to get out when I heard what I wanted. "Sarega, we can go shopping for spare parts. To buy something for the car." Kostya seemed a little upset. "Sure, there is one place. You'll find it there for sure. Let me warn Olya." I quickly got out of the car and told Olya that we'd be leaving. This made Grisha smile, and Olya's eyes and mane glistened. With a heavy heart, I started the car and drove away. I so wanted to watch, or at least overhear, my wife cheating on me. But it wasn't meant to be. We arrived at the same place where I used to buy parts for my old Porsche. Kostya began to slowly walk around and look at the displays, glancing at his phone, as it turned out, checking for current parts. Of course, he was waiting for a message from his brother saying, "We're done here." After he finished looking at the merchandise in the windows, he started talking to the salesman and then to the mechanics about what was best and how. I, on the other hand, sat there the whole time, drawing in my head what was being done with my wife right now. About an hour later, he got a text message on his phone, and when he saw it, he began to quietly wrap it up, and we drove home. When we got home, Olya was in the bathroom and Grisha was sitting on the sofa watching TV with a contented face and a slight smirk on seeing me. It was already evening, and Kostya, Grisha, and I sat down in the kitchen and began slowly emptying a bottle of cognac. When Olya came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, she immediately went over to me and kissed me on the lips, as if she missed me, and quickly retired to the bedroom. Even though she had washed herself clean of cheating, I could see from her eyes that she had had a good time. She came back to us in a light summer dress with a deep neckline, and sat at the edge of the table to my right and to Grisha's left. He immediately poured her a glass of wine. The guys began to tell different stories and jokes. Olya laughed loudly, and if Grisha told a story, she leaned toward him, giving a good view of her charms. I noticed how Kostya sometimes glanced at his wife, too. Over time, all attention drifted to Olya, which made it seem that no one listened to my comments, jokes anymore, not even my best friend Kostya. At the same time, as time went by, the situation became as if I had been invited here as a courtesy. And when I saw that the bottle of cognac was almost empty, I volunteered to bring some more. I was gone for about 15 or 20 minutes, and when I came back, there was silence in the house. There was no one in the kitchen, the glasses were empty. Leaving the bottle on the table, I went to the bedroom. But no one was there, and then towards the living room. Kostya was already lying on the same couch, and Olya was making a bed for Grisha. The lights were off, but Grisha was sitting next to her. "Are you back already, honey? The boys are tired. I'll make their bed and go to bed too." Olya quickly turned her head in my direction and continued her business. I went out in silence and started getting ready for bed. Olya was gone for a long time, and I began to imagine what they were doing there. She was drunk, so you could expect anything. I did not believe that Kostya would touch her. When I put my ear to the door, I heard only whispers that I could not make out. After a couple of minutes, the sounds of fiddling became audible. "That's enough, Grisha. He will fall asleep, and I will come." After that, I heard some whispering again. Realizing that my wife was finished here, I retreated and lay down on my bed. To my surprise, my wife didn't go into the bathroom, but came right over to me and kissed me on the cheek. She must have thought I was already asleep, for when she opened her eyes, she panicked a little. I pretended to be very sleepy. "Are you back yet?" I asked rhetorical questions and turned toward the closet and closed my eyes. Olya stood for a while, and then took off her dress and underwear and changed into another set of underwear, which I and recently gave or lay down next to me. I haven't had a chance to take off that lingerie yet, but I'm so tired today, my love. Let's do it tomorrow. I pretended to think she wanted intimacy with me. I turned to her and kissed her on the lips and closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. We lay face to face with her for about 20 minutes, after which she called and jerked me a couple of times. But not meeting any reaction, I got up quietly and left the bedroom, having previously thrown a translucent robe over myself. I lay there for another 5 minutes, got up, and tiptoed behind my wife, trying to pass the noise with her. The door in the living room was double, and since the couches were on the left side of the room, the right door had to be ajar for a better view. To my delight, it was the right door that was ajar. I slowly crept in. The view was good. I could see almost the whole left side, from the bone to Olya and Grisha. What I saw threw me into a kind of shock. On the one hand, it was exactly what I wanted, but on the other hand, I had not expected my wife to be so active with strangers. She was with Grisha first, then went to Kostya, then back to Grisha again. I, having watched this for more than an hour, got tired and went to bed. I woke up closer to 11 o'clock. Olya was still asleep. I got dressed and went into the kitchen. The guys were drinking tea. Grisha was on the phone and, noticing me, said hello, and Kostya was as if he was lost, and when he saw me, lowered his gaze. "So when is your train? Let me give you a lift." I tried to be cheerful and pretended not to know how they had fun with my wife until morning. "It'll be here in an hour, and it'll be standing for another 15 or 20 minutes. I'll have a cup of tea and we'll leave. We may not make it in time," I said, sitting down across from Kostya with a cup of tea. He still didn't look me in the eyes, and having said that he was going to get ready, got up from the table. Grisha followed his example. I quickly swallowed something from the table, drank my tea, and went to my father's bedroom to see the guests off. To my surprise, I did not feel any anger towards them. On the contrary, I was somehow grateful. I got a storm of emotions, and very soon our family life would be healed again. Olya was sitting in a turtleneck, pulling her sweatpants over her legs. Her Veda was unimportant. "Good morning, my love." Her voice was tired. "Good morning. Are you sick? Haven't slept well?" I kept playing the part of the one who didn't know. "Yes, I think I caught a cold yesterday. The guests are leaving. Say goodbye to them. I'll take them." At which Olya hurried to leave me. Having dressed, I quietly crept up and peeked around the corner. Bones was not visible, but Grisha stood at the front door with my wife and kissing. "Well, shall we go?" I shouted loudly, and after waiting a few seconds, went out to them. They were already just standing there. As it turned out, Kostya was already out. We drove the whole way in silence. Kostya had no face, and Grisha giggled occasionally and was afraid to look in my direction. There was surprisingly a lot of traffic, and we arrived 5 minutes before the train left. Grisha quickly said goodbye and got into the carriage. And Kostya hugged me. "Sorry." His voice was trembling. "What do you mean?" I mimicked surprised, to which he hesitated. "Of course, you can't say you had my wife at night. But if you were inconvenienced, friend, what were your plans?" Without waiting for an answer, he went up the stairs and disappeared into the carriage. I stood for a while, as after all, I really liked trains, and then I slowly drove home. That's how my close friend came to visit with his brother,